Once upon a time, Emma's heart raced as she pressed her back against the cold wall of her room, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She could hear Ethan's footsteps just outside the door, growing closer with each passing second. Her hands trembled as she clutched her doll tighter, wishing she could disappear, wishing she could escape. But there was no escape, not anymore. "Emma," Ethan's voice called through the door, smooth and insistent. "Come on. I told you, I'm not going to bite. It's just a game, remember?" Her stomach twisted. She had tried to hide. She had tried to stay away. But it never lasted long. He always found her. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, holding back tears. She wanted to scream, to tell someone what was happening. But there was no one who would listen. She was all alone. Just hours earlier, everything seemed normal. The Miller family's grand house stood tall and pristine, filled with expensive furniture and polished floors. From the outside, they looked like the perfect family, the kind everyone admired. Claire Miller, Emma's mother, had been bustling around the house, checking her emails and organizing meetings. Robert Miller, Emma's father, was already in his study, immersed in his laptop, working on business plans. Their life was a whirlwind of success, but one thing was always missing: time for Emma. Emma often found herself alone, playing in the corners of their huge house, her only company being the faint hum of the refrigerator or the tick of the wall clock. Her parents were always too busy to notice, too preoccupied with their own lives to see that Emma needed them. But today was different. Ethan, Emma's older cousin, had come to visit for the holidays. And though Emma didn't realize it yet, his arrival would change everything. Ethan was just 10, a few years older than Emma, but already, he had a certain dark charm that made her uneasy. He was smart, sneaky even, and every time he smiled, it felt wrong, like he was hiding something. She tried to avoid him, to stay in her room as much as possible. But it was only a matter of time before he found her. When Ethan had arrived that morning, Claire had greeted him with a warm hug, excited to have him for the holidays. But Emma had stayed in her room, avoiding the whole scene. She didn't want to be around him. But her mother, as usual, had no time to notice. "Emma," Claire had called, "come downstairs and say hello to Ethan. His family, after all." Emma had hesitated, then reluctantly obeyed. She walked downstairs slowly, keeping her head low, and tried to smile. But Ethan's eyes made her nervous. His grin, wide and sly, didn't reach his eyes. He wasn't just her cousin, he was someone she didn't trust, someone who made her skin crawl. "Hi, Emma," Ethan said in his usual playful tone, though it felt more like a command than a greeting. He leaned forward as if to hug her. He held her tight and whispered something in her ear. "You know you're mine, right?" Emma pulled back quickly. Something about what Ethan said made her feel trapped, like she couldn't breathe properly. Her mother smiled and ruffled Emma's hair. "Come on, sweetie. He's just here to visit. You two should bond, okay? We're family, after all." Emma nodded, but her thoughts raced. She didn't want to play. She didn't want to be near Ethan. But her mother was already gone, busy with work, and she couldn't argue. She found herself sitting on the couch beside him later, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach. Ethan was different when he looked at her, too intense, too interested. He kept asking her questions, pushing her to play games she didn't want to play. And all the while, Emma kept telling herself that she had to stay calm. But that didn't last long. As the afternoon wore on, Emma began to feel something shift. Ethan's games grew more uncomfortable, his smiles more insistent. He would caress her hair and her back. She started to feel like she couldn't escape. He was always there, always watching her, always waiting. And when Ethan finally followed her to her room, knocking on the door and calling her name in that tone, Emma knew something was wrong. He was coming for her again. She just didn't know how to stop him. That afternoon, she was cleaning the upstairs hallway when she heard voices below. Emma's voice was soft, but Olivia could tell she was upset, and then Ethan's voice, too loud and too sharp, rang through the house. Olivia's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the staircase, leaning slightly to hear what was going on. "Stop being so difficult, Emma," Ethan said, his tone full of mockery. "I'm just trying to have some fun. Why do you always have to ruin it?" "I don't want to play," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. Olivia's heart broke at the sound, knowing the little girl was trapped and scared. "Well, too bad," Ethan snapped, his voice filled with menace. "You don't get to decide." Olivia couldn't take it anymore. She hurried down the stairs, her footsteps quick but deliberate. As she entered the living room, Ethan spun around, his expression shifting instantly into a mask of innocence. "Olivia," he said brightly. "We were just playing a game." "Right, Emma?" Emma looked up at Olivia, her eyes wide and filled with unshed tears. She opened her mouth to speak but quickly shut it again, her hands gripping the hem of her dress tightly. Olivia took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "Emma, why don't you come help me in the kitchen? I could use some company." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, but he kept his smile in place. "Oh, come on, Olivia. We're just having fun. You don't need to butt in." "Emma," Olivia said firmly, ignoring Ethan, "let's go." For a moment, Emma hesitated, glancing nervously at Ethan. Then, slowly, she slid off the couch and walked over to Olivia. Ethan's fake smile faltered, and Olivia could feel his eyes boring into her back as she led Emma away. Once they were in the safety of the kitchen, Olivia knelt down in front of Emma, gently placing her hands on the girl's shoulders. "Emma," she said softly, "you don't have to be scared anymore. I'm here to help you. But I need you to trust me, okay?" Emma's lips trembled, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "He said no one would believe me," she whispered. "He said I'm his, and I can't tell anyone." Olivia's chest tightened with anger and sorrow. She took Emma's hand in hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I believe you, Emma. And I'm going to make sure he doesn't hurt you anymore. I promise." For the first time in what felt like forever, a flicker of hope appeared in Emma's eyes. It was faint, but it was there. Olivia knew she had to act fast. Ethan was cunning, and she couldn't risk him manipulating the situation further. She decided she needed to confront the Millers, no matter the consequences. Emma's safety was more important than her job. Later that evening, while Ethan was in his room, Olivia approached Claire Miller in the study. Claire was typing furiously on her laptop, barely looking up as Olivia entered. "Mrs. Miller," Olivia began, her voice steady but firm, "I need to talk to you about something important." "It's about Emma." Claire sighed heavily, pausing her typing. "What is it, Olivia?" "I'm very busy." Olivia hesitated for a moment, then said, "I believe something is going on between Ethan and Emma. Something that isn't right." Claire's expression hardened instantly. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice clipped. Olivia took a deep breath. "Ethan has been behaving inappropriately towards Emma. She's scared of him, Mrs. Miller. I've seen it. She's withdrawn, and she—" "Stop right there," Claire interrupted, her tone sharp. "Are you accusing my nephew of something? Ethan is just a child. He would never harm Emma. This is absurd." "Mrs. Miller," Olivia insisted, "I've seen the way he treats her. I've heard things. Emma needs help. Please, just talk to her. Ask her yourself." Claire stood up abruptly, her face a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I think you've overstepped your boundaries, Olivia. You're a maid, not a family counselor. I won't have you spreading lies about Ethan. If you can't focus on your duties, perhaps it's time you left." Olivia's heart sank. She had anticipated resistance, but hearing it still stung. "Mrs. Miller, I'm only trying to protect Emma," she pleaded. But Claire was already turning back to her laptop, dismissing Olivia with a wave of her hand. "That will be all," she said coldly. Defeated, but not willing to give up, Olivia left the study. She knew she couldn't count on the Millers to protect Emma. If they wouldn't listen, she would have to find another way to expose Ethan and ensure Emma's safety. The following morning, Olivia decided to reach out to someone outside the house. She contacted a friend who worked at a local child welfare agency, explaining the situation in vague terms at first, then giving more details when pressed. Her friend, Sarah, was immediately concerned. "Olivia," Sarah said, her voice firm, "you need to report this. If what you're saying is true, Emma could be in serious danger." "But I don't have proof," Olivia admitted, her voice trembling. "Ethan is careful. He deletes evidence. The parents won't believe me." "You've done the right thing by coming to me," Sarah reassured her. "Let me handle this. I'll escalate it to the proper authorities. Just keep Emma safe in the meantime." Relief flooded Olivia, but she knew the battle wasn't over. Ethan would notice if anything seemed off, and she needed to keep up appearances until help arrived. That evening, Olivia found Emma sitting in the corner of her room, hugging her doll tightly. Olivia sat down beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Emma," she said softly, "I've spoken to someone who can help. You're going to be okay. I promise." Emma looked up at Olivia, her eyes wide and filled with a fragile hope. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Olivia nodded, her voice steady. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm sure." The next day, 2 officers arrived at the Miller household. Claire and Robert were taken aback, their perfect facade cracking as the officers explained they were there to investigate concerns raised about Emma's safety. Olivia stayed in the background, watching as the walls of silence around Emma began to crumble. Ethan's confident smirk faltered for the first time when the officers asked to speak with him privately. Emma, with Olivia by her side, finally found the courage to share her story. Her voice was shaky, but every word was filled with truth. By the time the officers left, the Miller household was no longer the pristine, untouchable sanctuary it had once appeared to be. Olivia knew there was a long road ahead for Emma, but she also knew that the little girl was no longer alone. Emma's nightmare had begun to end, and Olivia silently vowed to stay by her side, helping her heal every step of the way.
For more folktale videos like this, drop a comment and don't forget to like and click the subscribe button.